Yeah, Max ain't here.
He's asleep.
Okay,
He has
understood.
heart problems.
I got it. It's okay.
Well, I'm not sitting next to Murphy, so I'm gonna sit here.
Next issue, we suspended Solomon for dereliction of duties because he wasn't showing up here. So that made sense to me pending the impeachment, right? The question is, Murphy has filed an impeachment proceeding against Max and Siobhan. Do we feel that someone filing an impeachment proceeding against someone for, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Murphy. Is it alleged, what basis? What's the impeachment basis? Corruption or something?
Corruption and gross negligence.
Good
Alex.
job leaking those documents that got me tortured, by the way, Murphy. Nice gross negligence.
Okay, can we?
Okay.
I didn't
Guys,
leak any
let's
documents.
make progress, guys.
Kids.
The question is do we feel that suspension is merited, or do we feel that, along the terms of innocent until proven guilty, given that the allegations are negligence and corruption, which need to be proven, as opposed to dereliction of duty, which is, self-evident. Do we feel that Max and Siobhan should be suspended awaiting the impeachment? Second to that, given that any, basically attorney can file an impeachment, do we need to consider what that means? Because if we say that you're automatically suspended pending the outcome of a formal impeachment proceeding, does that mean that people can just maliciously effectively suspend people by just filing an impeachment proceeding?
Technically, someone has requested impeachment on all of us against the DOC stuff, so we would be shut down completely if that were to happen. I'm against that.
Wait, who the hell's trying to impeach all of us?
The fucking Scotty Bard, I think.
DOC, Scotty, yeah.
It's a whole cluster.
It is.
Yeah,
It's
tell
a
him
fucking
no.
mess. Yeah, agreed.
Glenn, thoughts?
I mean, I agree with Canter. It's complicated, but they could just shut us all down, just if they felt like it.
In the face of impeachment proceedings that merit some kind of provable standard, as opposed to something that is self-evident like dereliction of duties because someone's just not showing up, then we would consider it not to be a suspension while the impeachment was pending. So,
Works for me.
and I've specifically omitted Siobhan and Murphy for obvious reasons from that discussion. Okay, so that's that hurdle. So now that we have everyone in the meeting that is allowed to be at the meeting based on our discussions, now the next question is,
Can
sort
I
of
kill
the
Murphy
approach
Braun?
to some of the constitutional issues raised. So there are a number of things that were brought up during the trial with Soze related to jurisdiction and language and things like that. The basis of most of his claims is that the Constitution currently reflects Los Santos as the general, term related to the jurisdiction. This is definitely an oversight on my part because, well, go figure. I looked all the way back to, the constitutions from, a couple government failures and restructures ago, and by God, if they all aren't the same. Apparently, no one has ever really looked at the fact that Los Santos has been used as a general term for our island, our little nation state here. And apparently, Soze is the first person to actually give a shit enough to point this out. There is, one part of it that is relatively simple fix in which, after this meeting, I'm going to meet with the judges that oversaw that case, and I'm going to direct them to, address that issue or loophole or whatever you want to call it in their formal docket, written out decision. So that will probably be some kind of case law that will interpret and or amend the Constitution, depending on how they see fit. Siobhan, I recognize that you had a piece of suggested legislation in there that did largely the same thing.
I just control F'd City of Los Santos and replace it with State of San Andreas.
And I noticed also there's an amendment in there about jurisdiction, which is great. So with your permission, I'll go ahead and pass that on to those judges.
Please do.
And they can use that as a basis to work from.
Would love that. My permission granted.
Does anyone have any thoughts, input on the Soze issues of jurisdiction in general, the inadequacies of parts of the Constitution, etc.?
So is this going to imply that we will have separate jurisdictions?
The way that it is written is that there is, one jurisdiction and that, one set of laws applies to everything. That is, obviously open to be amended. I'm just kind of gathering feedback and seeing if anyone has any thoughts, in terms of solving those jurisdictional issues. Now, I've already gone through and solved a couple issues. One of them was the weapons license legislation. Clearly, there were some failures there or inaccuracies when it comes to being very precise with language. The references to the civilian class 2 weapons license have been re-added to the penal code. weapons legislation has been amended to basically be a whole lot more thorough. That includes, descriptors for what you can do with a license, what you can do with a gun, what happens when you lose it, how you lose it, all the different things, protocols, what types of guns you're allowed to own, what things you're not, defining the different types of guns, both in the penal code and the legislation, etc. The second thing that was updated was the FOIA process. Was in the past something that was in PDSOPs as well as a DOJ document from Malton. That, based on feedback from Nino Chavez, a lawyer, Judge Bailey, and some other folks, has now been put into legislation. So the FOIA process now is a legislated process. The act is adopted and codified by that piece of legislation. And the FOIA system has been defined. There's also an appeals process if they feel that the PD were not forthright with what was requested. Utilize their power as judges to effectively amend the Constitution as a result of issues brought up during the case. For everyone's benefit, just in case people aren't really aware of this, the idea typically would be that the council would legislate and then the courts would interpret legislation, penal code, constitution, and then issue rulings based on their interpretations. And if those interpretations are new, different, novel, whatever, then that becomes, case law, common law, and can also include, for clarification, formal amendments to any legislation, constitution, etc., because the courts have the ultimate say in terms of interpreting the law. I will talk to them about initiating that. That should help with the jurisdiction issues, loopholes. Now, a couple of things that have been brought to me that I'm going to lay out. This is something that we'll need to work on probably before the next meeting. So I'll endeavor to do that, as well as anybody else who wants to give it a shot. As a result of, this whole FOIA thing, from talking to Nino and a bunch of other folks, is the fact that, there are some things that, due to everything getting derailed, are kind of piecemeal right now. One of them, for example, is that we fired all the DOC, but the legislation still exists. I would suggest a vote now to repeal the DOC legislation.
Yeah, that seems fair. That's a good idea.
Big eye.
Any thoughts on that?
Just their lawyer's going to say it's retaliatory and it's spoliation.
So we can just table it until the resolution of the case. That's fine with me.
I'm not saying that it is or it isn't. I'm saying that's probably what
I agree. And I don't want to act improperly or do anything that could influence the case, but I would just want it on record, especially Ms. Domino's notes there, that the council is being, active with these items. We're just acting out of caution and not doing it right now because of the pending case.
Seems fine with me.
The other thing I have is going to be a series of things. And these are things that we've discussed as judges, and I'm just going to make you guys aware of them and where the thought process is right now. So some of the things that were raised as a result of Soze's steroid-ridden diatribe, that's factual, by the way. Him and Angel used to do steroids together. I saw them. They were doing them in the MRPD parking garage about 5-6 years ago. So not defamation or anything, provable, untrue. When Soze was bringing up his complaints, several of the things that he brought up had to do with items in the Constitution that deal with due process, things that are not quite established. In the Constitution, it does have example of terms for bail and things like that. But
the Constitution is so
it also, has like the standard conditions of parole.
I don't know.
And it talks about parole as a system and, the basic conditions. And the conditions talk about, checking in with people and things like that. Now, it does say that, this could be from the courts or, another authorized force. But it mentions repeatedly. But it also repeatedly mentions a parole officer, an assigned parole officer. And this is something that, I wrote into the Constitution thinking that, well, it would get run with at some point, but it never really did. So, feeling the need to now kick the horse in the ass, I'm going to sort of suggest, given that the sheriff's office is out there in Blaine County, right next to the prison, Cornwood, how would you feel about someone in your department, doesn't matter who it is right now, but, maybe just taking on the task of proposing a system of assigning parole officers and handling that? Because if we do have people that are sentenced to these long prison terms, tends to reason that, they should have someone checking in on them, making sure they're not getting into crime, making sure they're keeping their nose clean, all that, right?
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
You know,
Only issue that I would have is, hell, it really just comes down to if we got enough units.
well,
so
yeah, that's a
far-
good point.
Yeah, I think so far the BCSO has fleshed out a lot more quickly than was originally, thought that it was going to happen. So, hell, I'd say that it might be pretty likely that we could do this. Send maybe a couple officers in there, jail.
Well, the
or whatever.
thing is that it's only for people who are paroled, right? So after they serve their sentences and they get out, we just need parole officers who would be assigned to go like be the ones that check in with these guys. Oh, and then one thing we are also working on is trying to make it so that the MDT has a section where common law and court advisories and such can be published. So this would be like just like a DOJ public facing DOJ section. That's not legislation, right? Because legislation,
I think that's
stems from like
needed.
the council, right?
Yeah.
This would be a DOJ advisories. So we issue clarifications on things like loans, for example, we did in the past,
Mhm.
Yeah.
as well as like common law. And this way everyone is aware of and can read any outcomes from court cases that affect the
Faith
law.
with it.
People look at something like statute of limitations and they don't go, well, 30 days is the maximum amount of time I have to press charges, but that, should really only be in like a really dire circumstance, and I should endeavor to press them as quickly as
Yeah.
possible.
Right.
Instead, people go, well, I got 30 days to press charges. People should endeavor to do things.
As quickly as possible.
Yeah.
From my understanding, it legitimately took this long to figure some of this shit out. And I know I approved a warrant that was on the last day, and I would not have approved it if it wasn't for something else that happened just a couple days prior that led me to believe this is something that we should actually chase. And there's like a breadcrumbs here. Otherwise, you got to let this one go. So I said, you know what? There's something there. Go ahead and send it. In all these cases where somebody's trying to push a warrant at 29 days, I think that's up to us as command and high command to say, you know what? Not to be an inhibitor, but sometimes you gotta make an executive decision there and say, this is not one of that. You should have had this sooner. If it's not legitimate, then I'm not signing off on this. But if that happens under this legislation, it's no questions whatsoever. That warrant is out. That warrant is over. This thing is done, and then there's no more like dead period between that 30 days and 32 days maybe when that warrant ends.
What do you think is the real root of the issue, Cornwood? Do you think the people just misunderstand how things work? I mean, let's just put the cards on the table. From the DOJ perspective, this issue with Barry Benson really felt like to us that PD effectively didn't get their shit together. No one pushed the arrest warrant. No one gave a shit and actually like went through and issued the arrest warrant despite having the evidence. And then an officer who did give a shit then thought to himself, well, if I file an arrest warrant and it's out of the statute of limitations like 2 days after I file it or a day after I file it, then it kind of freezes time and I found a loophole to, the whole statute of limitations issue. And to me, in the DOJ, we've had a long-standing policy that we do not docket normal quote unquote charges, because otherwise police could, in theory, never reach a statute of limitations on a charge as long as they just, put something up on the docket.
Right.
Because then they could amend their filing and include the evidence later and attach more witnesses later and all that, which, by the way, is one of the things Soze complained about with due process, where he got put on a hold and the judge approved the extension on the 24 hours to 72. And it's, the Constitution says within 72, there has to be a filing on the docket. And there needs to be due process so that when the person is actually put on the hold, not investigative, but for the HUT, because the HUT's approved, due process says they got to get to see the evidence against them. So if PD gets this, docket filing up there, but doesn't attach all the evidence, then it's kind of like a loophole where they get like extra time. But this person's rights are then violated because they don't get to confront the evidence against them in the appropriate manner and time. It kind of feels like a moral issue where I would, and any other reasonable person, Cornwood, would agree with you and the rest of PD, in that morally, it does seem wrong that, someone gets away with a crime because, it doesn't get investigated or whatever. although something may feel wrong morally, we can't jeopardize our due process and system of law to get the bad guy just because we, feel like it. Unfortunately, one of the hardest things about the law is that it has to be fair to everybody. Sometimes it helps you get the bad guy, and sometimes the bad guy walks scot-free and laughs in your face.
Yeah, I mean, that's just how it goes. I understand all that. The reason why I okayed this was, and I wasn't going to, there was another circumstance of the exact same thing happening with Barry Benson, and same exact thing. 911 call, Barry Benson, wish I could be there for you, TJ. I'm like, okay, this some bitches, he didn't get caught last month, and here you go. It's he's sending it again on Ursula. Okay, yeah, look, this guy's asking for it. So that's the reason why I okayed it, because I thought this was one of them times where shit, why not?
Yeah.
But I agree with you, 99%. This was just that one other time to me. That's basically when this legislation would be used. What I would suggest, if it starts getting abused and all of a sudden it's happening all the time, people putting out warrants at 29 days. I mean, I would.
So what is the exact function of the legislation? You go over it again.
Basically, if you put out a warrant and that warrant extends past the 30-day statute, then the statute would be extended until the end of that warrant. But then as soon as that warrant expires, you can't you can't ask for the warrant to be renewed or anything like that. The only way that could happen is if it's a just standard infinite warrant, like the ICU situation we talked about, or capital charge, things like that. But normally you can request for a warrant to get extended, but in this case you would not be allowed to do that. It would just be normal.
Oh boy.
Wow.
That's ironic. As far as I was concerned, that some bitch was asking for it, so I said, you know what? Shit, go ahead and send it.
I think the issue is that they're already waiting until the very, very last second. Do we really want to encourage that even more? Like the Solomon charges, there was meant to be charges pressed alongside this impeachment that we're talking about. I was called in by Coyote the very final day. I didn't think anyone was even looking into it anymore. And suddenly he drops, hey, you still down to testify? I think by that point it was probably out of statute of limitations, to be honest. But like, why does this keep happening?
Case in point.
I think
as far as I'm aware, they had not found any new information about that Solomon case in weeks. So I don't really know why it's at until lately.
So, well, that's the thing. There was another shooting that occurred with the exact same.
The one I'm referring to is the case against.
We're talking about the Solomon
the initial
accessory or whatever.
Yes, exactly. That was waited until the last second, even though I don't know why it was. They already had.
I don't know why the hell they
we already had all that.
I asked him about it, and he was still working on the. He had too much on him, and he didn't know how to prioritize. He prioritized poorly, and had no concept of time management skills.
Yeah,
that would be my understanding.
We just shouldn't be actively encouraging that, I guess, is my thing.
No.
I like him a lot. It does seem like he was in a rough spot.
He was.
It's just by legislation.
I think that is on us as command and high command to step in and correct that behavior, more so than using this legislation as a crutch. But this legislation is going to be, because this has come up a few times. Like, it ain't just me, right? I mean, people asked about this several times, and I just think it'd be nice to have a clear cut. Hey, this is how it works. Period. Point blank. End discussion.
Let's call a spade, Cornwood. If something happened 29 days ago, there's almost no reason that it should be getting pursued on that 29th day.
Who gives a shit? Hell, I get that.
Well, it's just not even that. I'm not saying who gives a shit. I'm saying the circumstances I can come up with to justify why something would have to happen on the 29th day are extremely few. Right.
Yep.
Like maybe, for example, someone gets murdered in cold blood. The PD have no leads. And then on the 29th day, someone gets arrested robbing a bank, and they're dumb enough to, like, while police are chasing them, run into their house. Police then hot pursuit, raid the house, and find the hot gun from that murder. So then maybe, I could be like, hey, we had no leads, and now all of a sudden we have a lead and we know who did it, so we have to file these charges. I could understand that, but absent that kind of very unique circumstance, it really just feels like we're just putting a band-aid on people not doing their job.
Yeah, that's fair.
Look, I want to enable those rare circumstances, but gosh, like I said, you know, even in that rare circumstance that I just described,
it's a shame
that would be a
PBO's more
docket
competent than half
filing
the police.
because it would be a
He's
capital
doing
case,
great.
right?
Right.
He just
I
needs
can't
to
for
learn
the
how to
life of
lock
me
it
think
in
of
and
a fucking
execute.
circumstance that would, like, we're talking about Ursula getting shot, right? And that, you know, that's awful and shouldn't happen. But are we really gonna make an exception of like our entire system of justice to enable the police to hunt for somebody who shot somebody a month ago for 3 extra days?
Yeah,
I mean, I see what you're saying.
It's tough. I'm right there with you morally, but it ain't like that. And I just don't know if I can justify giving, you know, people an out on this shit.
Well, I
Then
mean,
it just becomes a habit at that point. It's like I told you, it's like this FOIA shit. Then all of a sudden it's like, well, I got to write this arrest warrant, but well, I got, you know, there's like 4 days in the statute of limitations.
we could always repeal it if we think the PD is abusing it. We just have to vote to repeal it, right? Just like the DOC.
Why don't we do this? Let's table the issue. How about in the last 3 weeks of your term, you look for me for any situation that your legislation would help, right? And if there are situations you can bring to me, you know, in the next 3 weeks or whatever, or historical ones where you can show me that, you know, this is a good reason to enact this kind of legislation, here's a situation that would help, then I'll submit the legislation myself.
If we just want to set this aside, we can, just for and see what happens.
I'm on your side morally. Anyway,
I would love to.
so how many strikes do you think would be like appropriate?
I don't think it should be too little, because, you know, some of these guys, you know, they get excited, they got fast cars, you know, they want to go send it. And look, I understand, but, you know, there's got to be a line here. It's really damn hard to catch these guys, and it's really damn dangerous. I get it. But if we're seizing the vehicle altogether, I think it should probably be greater than 5 or 6. I was thinking maybe up to 8 even. It might be better to start with a low number with this legislation, and then over time we can amend it and we can raise it. If there's a whole bunch of strike points going out early on, then I say shit, we can knock it up a little bit and say it's like 8, going up from like 5 or 6, just depending on how much is happening.
What if instead it was like a cool down? So you got to go 30 days without, and you're flagged as a street racer. Maybe you get like more fines for wreck driving and speeding and shit.
I think it might be more complicated. Fine them more for reckless driving and whatnot. For like their traffic citations are, you know, 50%.
Well, if you have the vehicle like logged, right? Like that it's been caught in a street race.
You could do it manually. I mean, I will say this: if you get your ass caught like 8 times, hell, even 5 or 6 times street racing in a vehicle, that's dangerous as shit. You probably shouldn't have that vehicle. You probably are not. It's like negligent ownership of a vehicle at that point.
Shouldn't even be street racing. You're probably pretty bad at it.
Yeah, hell, you probably shouldn't be driving.
No, if I can get over the hump of why street racing would require the extra oomph. Like I'm pretty sure I made the charge pretty severe, didn't I?
Yeah, I think this gives us look, these guys are pushing marijuana.
I mean, it's 7 points on your license to street race.
A lot of points.
Plus, you know, plus it's going to be reckless evading when they run from the cops, right? So that's number 3. So you lose half your license for 1 street racing arrest. You get caught twice, you have no license. I'm not sure.
I mean, I'm thinking about it as like these guys are, you know, slinging drugs, doing all kinds of illegal shit. They're making all kinds of money. You know, if they do happen to get caught enough times where their vehicle gets taken away from them, and they got to go spend another 100 grand on another car, then hell, you know, you got to go back to work, son. You got to make sure you're not just, you know, showing up here and you're street racing shit. I mean, you got bills to pay. You know, lazy ass. Sorry, kids.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, I think we've beat the horse to death on this, so why don't we just put it to vote then? So the system as proposed would be strikes for street racing. You said you wanted to be more than 3. What was the number you settled on?
Maybe we start at 5 or 6. There's a bunch of strikes going out early. Then I say we raise it a little bit.
Are you doing the tampering thing, or are you saying no matter what?
I think no matter what.
Okay, so any vehicle, no matter whether tampered with or not, that is registered to a personally owned civilian, right? MDT profile and such. We'll say a tax-paying citizen, not a local. Any vehicle that is registered to a tax-paying citizen that is found to have engaged in a street race, regardless of the circumstances of who's driving it, that vehicle will get 1 strike. And under the proposed legislation, 6 strikes against a vehicle would render that vehicle forfeit in the same way that the VAS system occurs, where it would then be auctioned off to civilians. Okay, so Cornwood obviously is a yay. So clockwise, Murphy.
As is, it's gonna have to be a no, but I am supportive of continuing to develop some kind of system.
Siobhan.
No for now.
Glenn, Mr. Frugal.
I'm also a no for now. I like the idea. I think it might be better if the points drop off eventually, or maybe even it's a timed impound.
Oh, so maybe the maybe a street racing impound is like a longer impound than normal.
I would be okay with that.
That's not.
I
terrible.
like that.
Yeah.
Well, so here's my issue with that is like,
What?
these guys got to go to work the next day, maybe, and
use their not street racing car.
Yeah,
well,
you said they make money off of drugs. Surely they can buy a cheap car.
Yeah, I get that. It's just I don't want them to get depressed, okay? Because they had their car, their car impounded for extra long.
They'd be more mad if they lost the car.
Yeah, but it takes much longer for that to happen, and I think if it happens right off the rip, it's oh shit. I'm just gonna stay in my room all day, and I don't want to get up no more.
I think it should be, let's say you get 3 points, your car gets impounded for 2 weeks or something, and then it resets.
I can get behind that. That is incentive to at least stop doing it as much, It's a little bit more in the moment, right? I think the longer term you make the punishment for it, the more people just, I don't know, also won't care about it. But then they suddenly will when they hit a certain amount of points. But by that point, there's nothing they can do about it, so they're just going to get mad.
I believe in as much freedom as possible. Hey, I want a street race every day. Well, hey, you got X amount of chances. Good luck. I don't want to infringe on their, damn right to street race for 2 weeks with that vehicle, unless it gets real bad.
Well, I'm saying it's the same point system, but instead of taking the car, you just impound it for 2 weeks.
Well, okay, let's, it sounds like the vote has given way to more discussion. Maybe Cornwood can update, in terms of the feedback that's been given. And maybe we, have a second discussion on this next week.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, because I think there's been a lot of good ideas brought up. So
one of them is a fishing license. The other one is a liquor license. With the advent of business licenses, to be serving alcohol to someone under the age of 21, they would receive a strike point or a warning point for the first time, but a second time they would.
Wait, why 21?
What do you mean, why 21?
Well, I mean, when I said why 21?
I mean, we can drop a little.
I mean, we could do it 25 because our brains aren't finished developing and it's harmful.
Well, hold on.
But you need a little liquor to help your brain develop the right way.
So 21 is fine.
If you're old enough to vote, you should be old enough to drink.
We must protect the
all
youth.
drank before 18 anyway.
So you're telling me that poor little Tugs gets to vote for and run for office, but then you want to tell little Tugs that he can't drink after he could have voted for you? That seems wrong.
Well, I changed my mind. I like that.
You're old enough to fight in a war. You're old enough to drink.
Yeah, I changed my mind.
I am for it for that exact. Yes, I do not want. Yes, Little Tugs has no business drinking.
I think the
Until
lower
he's
the
age of
age
21.
that people can drink, the faster their livers will fail, and the more business I get at the hospital.
Oh, that's a good point.
Say
that is a good.
He's only 19. You sure as shit you are. Here's your damn citation.
Wait, Glenn, what do you think?
Well, I don't know who this little Tug is, but I think you gotta start somewhere with the age. 21 seems like a good number.
Thank you, Glenn.
Seems like we might be deadlocked on this one, so I'm gonna have to table that.
Yeah, maybe.
Looks like we're 3-3.
Right. Okay.
It's not bad.
I was also gonna add. Okay, so like a second part of that is alcohol distribution license. is available for a $20,000 fee for distributors of alcohol. Strict industry standards will be delineated that they have to ensure all sales are business to business only, so they can only engage in business to business sales, right? They can only sell to establishments with valid liquor licenses. Yeah, you hate this? Tell me why.
Seems like pointless regulation.
You're being so Texan right now.
It's the Ireland drinking age.
16.
12.
If 18-year-olds can't drink legally, they're just going to do cocaine. And like I said, if you can fight in a war, you can drink.
Moving on. Fishing licenses.
What's wrong with fishing?
Nothing is wrong with fishing. I just think there should be a $200 license. That's it. And yes, 200. Here's why. It should be a job that somebody can arrive, day in the city, they got $500 in their pocket, they can get a $200 fishing license and a $150 fishing rod, some bait or whatever else. They'll have just enough money in their pockets to get themselves started and earn enough money to get themselves, a hot meal for the day and put themselves on the path to success.
You familiar with the economy right now? As far as
I am familiar with the economy.
Because a meal is really expensive still.
They're really expensive right now.
They wouldn't be able to afford a fishing rod if they had to pay for a $200 license.
No, they wouldn't be able to afford it until they sold some fish. They're not going to be able to get a meal immediately. They're going to have to do some work to earn that meal. Also, there was a PD report that was given to me by Flop, who did a bunch of work. The Fishing License Act also would nasty trebuchet fishing hooks. I don't know the word for them. Should they be illegal? He thought so. Something about them being unnecessarily cruel to the fish.
There's a lot of fishing and stuff like that, so taking a look at everything and coming up with some sensible regulations for fishing seems appropriate.
I agree.
I don't really like them getting a misdemeanor if they don't get a license, or a felony if they don't get a license.
No, it shouldn't be a felony.
So should animal cruelty?
No.
I think it should be a separate charge.
Maybe if they're using that bullshit hook.
Maybe if they're using that bullshit hook, yeah.
Is there a term for fish poaching?
Fishing.
It was illegal taking of protected wildlife.
Illegal taking of protected wildlife. Yep. We also had possession of illegal fishing hooks. And criminal use of a gill net? Am I right? I think we had both of those.
I feel like we shouldn't make a whole bunch of extra charges and we just call them all animal cruelty. For the fish hooks and whatnot.
Animal cruelty is such a stigmatized thing, though. It's like drunk driving. You don't want to have that on your record in fishing, bro.
Yeah, well, it depends on how you're fishing. I see what you're saying. Fish hook shit. Was that a felony years ago?
I think the misuse or the use of the hook and the possession were misdemeanor.
Mm-hmm.
There was also another misdemeanor that was the net. The felony was poaching because there were this protected species or whatever, the unauthorized taking. I'm kind of having a hard time saying that anything really is super in need of protection. I mean, hell, the fella
snapping turtles.
Yeah, but why do they need protecting if there are that goddamn many?
They're invasive as shit.
I mean, if you go down there, there's a whole leaderboard of the top 10 biggest snapping turtles that have been caught.
I'll go on record. I don't think anything to do with fishing should be a felony.
I was going to say the same exact thing, actually.
Why don't we do this, Cornwood? Why don't you have Floppy Drive write up his proposal and maybe give it to the DOJ, and we can look into misdemeanors and all that.
Cool.
Yeah, but in terms of, I think honestly, I don't feel like we should regulate someone stepping off the plane and trying to get a rod and go fishing. I'd rather that than them driving 120 miles an hour with a grime van.
True.
So I for my sanity, I'd rather deal with a bunch of fishermen, minding their own business out in the wilderness, soaking in some sun.
You can do illegal, it's not stop and frisk.
Well, not even a license check. You could even just say compliance check, right? With fishing regulations. So the act of fishing itself is not licensed, but if you are involved in the act of fishing, in state waters, then you still have to be subject to inspection of your rod and your hook and all that, right? And if you're found to be using an illegal hook, then that, calls into question, your actions, and you get prosecuted under the penal code.
Roundtable discussion about mandated minimum pay for government employees.
That's what
Yes.
TJ Walker proposed.
Yes,
Yeah.
but I wanna have like a roundtable discussion rather than just he's not here for us to talk about and to brainstorm on that
Yeah.
act. So
No, you're not wrong.
why don't we try to do the best we can with what we know? Do we think they should all have a living wage? And if so, what is a living wage? And if it's a living wage for one career, shouldn't that, translate to others? Or do others deserve or have higher, cost burdens that they deserve it more? I just wanted to like have that overall discussion with everyone.
Okay. I was always on board for some sort of minimum wage because other people can do a hell of a lot with their time, right? Whereas inherently, we're trapped in what we do. And a lot of our jobs are extremely needed.
It did everybody but lawyers.
Yeah.
So I would like them to be included as faux government, they're Schrodinger's government employee.
If we switch it from
so the minimum wage we had before the increases and adjustments
or the sliders
was like 700 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
I believe so.
So set a minimum wage at 700 an hour, but that's only for
700 was for lawyers, 750 was for doctors.
Well, that's only for government positions, right?
Right.
Yeah.
What is this
Lawyer,
entire
doctor,
paragraph?
No one
cop,
else really
whatever.
needs the help, to be honest.
Well, because I was going to say, because if you can't say minimum wage is 700 because unemployment, is
Right.
like
Sure.
50 or something.
Right, so it's not a minimum wage, it's like the standard minimum. I'm looking to set like a standard living wage for government employee positions. Get a job.
Fair enough. That seems fair enough to me. I know TJ suggested 1K. I wouldn't have come in with that if I'd done it myself.
Yeah, I think 700 is fine. Because we're talking like actual minimums, right? Like, let's say a mayor comes in and just hates the EMS, right? For whatever reason.
Mhm.
And he's like, all right, all EMS make, the minimum amount, 700. All right, anyone against minimum wage, $700?
I want it to be 750 and I'm gonna be a stick.
Pretty nice house. I've seen it.
I know. Thank you. It's not cheap.
Okay.
It's
Do we
expensive.
want to pass what Walker wrote? Just change the number?
So he said, Section 1, recognition of vital services, blah, blah, designated essential workers, doctors, EMS, police. Wait, restaurant workers?
I want
Take that shit
lawyers
out.
to be in here and
Oh,
take
yeah,
that shit out.
okay.
He put
I don't
restaurant
know.
workers and left out lawyers.
Take out restaurant workers and put in lawyers.
Oh, because he's doing essential workers, not government workers.
Yeah,
I think
lawyers
we-
need some
Lawyers
love,
are
man.
essential workers.
Okay, so take out restaurant and put in lawyer.
Well,
Let's
I'm a big
clockwise from Siobhan.
Yeah,
She's a yes.
Yep,
Glenn.
Yep.
No.
Yes.
Alan.
Yeah, I'm okay with it. Cornwood.
Woo.
I vote yes.
Murphy.
Yeah.
Mark that as approved, and I've recorded the vote.
Okay. I was gonna bring up. We passed drug scheduling way back in the day. And never got posted.
Correct.
Essentially, this is. I have no issue either way. I'm not fighting you on this. Is that just a no from you?
No, it's not a no.
Okay. That's all right. Yeah.
I just listen. If I run through all the backlog of shit that's got to get changed,
No, you're good.
I will put in drug scheduling for marijuana. But right now, given that the only drug that we have seen since the restructure is marijuana, and there is,
Okay.
it
No,
just
that's all
hasn't
right.
been a priority. But I recognize that it's approved, and I recognize that it's something that needs to get hashed out.
Okay.
Maybe I'll let
Absolutely.
one of the other judges sink their teeth into.
Sure. There is no HIPAA here, despite the fact that people continue to reference it. And I and many other people would like it to stay that way. I do not think that making sharing information verbally illegal is a path I want to go down, just in case. There are some things that we have in our SOPs that other people would not be required to follow. Including privacy, right? It's an SOP and not a law, as well as numerous other expectations for standards regarding medical. Essentially, this would put the board of directors in a position to have a say regarding medical businesses. Just a say, just essentially like they need to get it signed off by a member of the board of directors that they have spoken with them. Essentially to try and avoid things like Beta Life in the future, or things like, Nexus Pharmaceuticals, or other various businesses that could have very greatly mishandled those and or utilized them for illegal means. It also would state that pharmaceutical companies would be required to be tier 3 and maintain both legal owners and workers, because that was a huge slippery slope back in the day.
I think we should probably table this till Max is back.
Okay, fair enough.
Just because there's so
It is
much in
regards to businesses.
the businesses that I don't really feel
Yeah.
comfortable, I see where you're going with it. That's a lot of the mayor's purview that I'm not really comfortable kind of sticking my nose in.
All right. I think I'm good. Go for it, Siobhan.
Okay,
Close
cool.
us out, Siobhan.
All right, Peeper Protection Act, kind of weighty. You might just want to read through it. So we're acknowledging the two-party consent state. However, looking at placing these standalone spy cameras in placement in areas that is outside of the public view and from locations not normally accessible to the public.
What does that mean?
Illegal. Let's say you shouldn't be placing cameras on top of government utility or government buildings.
Oh yeah, it's trespassing.
Yeah, but
and littering, technically,
right? Or the courthouse, right?
Yeah, also littering.
Things, or light.
What if it's like not trespassing though? It's somewhere they can go. Like we had an issue with people putting up the camera on the side of the hospital. You can freely walk there, but it's still surveying on a government building. Okay, fuck it. You think littering's gonna stop them?
No, just take the camera. It's trash.
It is trash. I like that. We did tear it down.
Yeah,
we did immediately tear it down.
To me, it's kind of a nothing burger because if someone does it in public, well, it's just trash and you can just take it. And if, someone does it on private property, well, then it's on your property, so it's yours and you can take it. Technically, the only place you'd be legally free to place a camera like that would be your own property.
What about
There's no need to
what about
legislate
like senior buns?
Yeah, that's public.
Right. So okay.
The plaza is state owned.
True. Okay. Do you think that cameras need to be identified with like a sign indicating, alerting people that they are being filmed? Do you think that there should be some sort of signage when let's say it's on your home, so that people are aware of the fact that they're being filmed?
I don't understand.
It has to do with the two-party consent state, right? If you're outside of a publicly viewable place, but there's somebody in a publicly viewable place, should you have to have posted signage?
Can't you just take it down if it's at your house? Like what?
No, sure. So look at it from both sides, right? Like, should a person who's in a public, so they're walking, but they're not aware that they are in fact being watched?
Well, that's public. You don't have an expectation of privacy.
No, they don't. They don't. But should there be posted signage regarding that? I'm not.
Hey, asshole, you're in public.
No, just like, hey, asshole, if you try to go near my private property, it's being filmed.
No.
All right, that's fine.
I can put a security camera on my property. And it could look at my parking lot and the next street over, and I ain't got to warn nobody.
What about the listening to phone calls?
So that's the next part, right? I'm less pressed, and I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah,
I don't really care about the camera.
We can remove cameras.
Doing what now?
The listening to phone calls.
Illegal to listen to phone calls on private and government property.
As one of the first people who had one of my phone calls listened to, and information leaked through Gossip Gal, it's not great.
Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure someone listened to my call the other day as well. It was instead of MRPD, so that was my fault for being stupid and having a phone call there. Yeah, so just making it illegal to listen to phone calls on private and government property.
Why do you ever need to listen to phone calls?
Yeah, get a life, you know what I mean?
Some people
I don't
do
want to
not
listen to
have
my
those.
own phone calls.
Yeah, what the hell?
Yeah, I barely even want to pick up my phone.
There's people listening to phone calls.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, Alan.
And you...
I'm pretty sure somebody would listen to the call between Max and myself where he said that he was at City Hall still, and then he got shot in the face. Pretty sure that's how they knew where he was.
So how do we prove that?
Well, there was somebody seen running around outside with the listening device right after that.
Right, but how do you prove that they listened to you? Does it like record what call they were listening to?
Sure doesn't.
Seems kind of
I don't know.
impossible then.
To be honest. I just seen them.
I'm just trying to think through, like, if you make this illegal and I go into court, what burden of proof, what standard evidence do I use?
Sure.
And if it's just
possessing it, that's a lot.
you're accusing someone of listening to your call, how do you prove they listen to your call?
I guess I think the device should be subject to seizure. I think we should just take them.
I mean,
That
they use that for news,
seems
don't
a
they?
little...
Maybe you have to prove that there was other connections for evidence of a crime, Alan. I'm not sure. I just think that it is a problem when it's occurring on government property, and I'm not sure.
Well, doesn't that cover by
what the-
trespassing?
They don't have to be on the government property itself to be able to listen inside of government property. It goes through
It
walls.
sounds like
You can
kind
sound
of
wave.
sounds
It's
to me like
5G
the
shit. Yeah.
like the fish and stuff with floppy disk.
So what about
Kind of feels like we need like some kind of like, remember how like before we had made bootlegging illegal, PD had said, hey, there's moonshine popping up. And we're like, all right, well, what do you want us to do about it? And they were like, well, you know, Cornwood even, they're distributing it and there needs to be a harsher penalty and all this. And so we came out with bootlegging because it was a response to like a need, right? But
right.
I don't really know.
You can't see a need for this?
Well, not sort of, but I'm trying to understand how this works in enforcement, let alone jurisdiction, let alone jurisprudence, right? Like, how does a cop? So the only thing we can come up with so far is just making the device illegal, but
I mean, it has no other purpose but to invade people's privacy.
Yeah,
and expectations of privacy.
Yeah, but what if it's like a gag and you want to listen to your dad call the Star Trek hotline and argue with, you know, the experts?
So on the idea of the trespassing, right? Would that essentially just be the moment they're warned and they stick around, then it can be trespassing at that point?
Hold on. What I'm just gonna say a step further. What if there's a picture of somebody using the device too?
Well, these places are public, is why I ask. Would it just be like one warning and then?
I think a warning, yes, and then trespassing that might be an option. But what happens if they're in a public area where they can't be trespassed? Let's say they're on the sidewalk outside of MRPD. Can't be trespassed on the sidewalk, right?
They give it to the news people. Is that what I heard?
All right, look. We need a floppy disk dossier. I'm not gonna legislate something when I have no fucking idea about any of this shit.
Yeah, there needs to be a lot more information on this thing and how it works, what purpose it serves. If it serves no legal purpose whatsoever, then that is the only time in which we can actually market for seizure. Because if there's any like, hey, I have this thing and I'm going to use it legally for something, then you just can't really take it.
All right. Well,
we did it, everybody. We didn't get shot.
Good job, everyone. We got through a meeting in approximately 2.5 hours.
That's good.
I'm gonna go listen to Erwin Dundee claim that he didn't do exactly what he probably did.